Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April edition of PwC Nigeria's monthly tax podcast series. Last month, we discussed the circular on fiscal incentives for the gas sector released by the Ministry of Finance, a federal high court ruling on tax deposits for tax cases, and also delved into family business. Please check our pages for further details. Today, we'll be discussing the recent executive orders issued by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. My name is Ochuwa Alegeh, and today I am joined once again by Kenneth Erikume, partner and lead tax reporting and strategy for PwC Nigeria. He is also the chief operating partner of PwC Nigeria. Welcome, Kenneth.
Thanks, Ochuwa. It's my pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. All right, Ken, we're excited to get your thoughts and perspective on these orders, so let's jump right into it.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, so to start off, what was your initial reaction when you saw the release of these executive orders?
Yeah, I could see a clear intention to develop strategically in an area where Nigeria has competitive advantage, and that is in respect of hydrocarbons. Okay. There was also a clear intention to prioritize the growth of foreign direct investment in the Nigerian economy, and in particular the oil and gas industry. These orders aim to provide incentives both for the production leg of the gas industry as well as the midstream sector, and streamline the approval process for contracts in the oil and gas industry as a whole, and other things.
Okay, I agree. I mean, I think I definitely picked up on those things you mentioned while I was reading the orders myself. So let's start with the first order, relating to new incentives being rolled out in the oil and gas sector. The order states that these incentives will be made available to greenfield developments. I think these incentives can be summarized as tax credits of up to 30% for greenfield developments that have their first gas production dates dating prior to 2029, January 1st specifically, and then also tax allowances for greenfield projects that have their first commercial production dating after the said date of 2029, January 1st once again. So what are your thoughts on these incentives?
Thanks, Ochuwa. The first executive order, like you rightly identified, grants tax credits for non-associated gas greenfield developments in onshore and shallow water. Okay. That's important. With first gas production on or before 1st of January 2029. The tax credit is based on the lower of $1 or 50 cents per thousand SCOF, or 30% of the fiscal gas price, depending on the hydrocarbon liquids content of the field. The tax credit applies for a maximum of 10 years, after which it becomes a tax allowance at specified rates, same rates as as is available for the tax credits. Yeah. The order also grants investment allowance of 25% on qualifying expenditure on plant and equipment for midstream, new and ongoing midstream oil and gas projects. These allowances are deductible from assessable profits from the year of purchase when you make those acquisitions, without reducing the residual value of the qualifying capital expenditure. However, the allowance kicks in after the first, there's an incentive in the Companies Income Tax Act that gives an incentive of up to 5 years tax holiday for gas utilization. So it kicks in after that. And then it's rescinded if the plant and equipment are sold within 5 years. So if you acquire, after 2 years you sell, then there's going to be a clawback. Okay. Or if the purchase is not used for gas utilization subsequently. Now, these incentives are designed to support the development of gas, like I said before, and utilization of gas in Nigeria. This is crucial for diversification of our economy and creation of value-added products. It's expected to encourage investment in gas production and gathering, especially in the light of the global energy transition and the need to reduce gas flaring in Nigeria.
Definitely. Thank you, Kenneth. Those are definitely important things to think about. Let's move on quickly to the second order now. This particular order speaks to the misapplication of Nigerian content regulations or requirements in the oil and gas sector, amongst other things as well. So the president's directive outlines accepting or approving a Nigerian content plan that includes entities that are purely intermediaries and show no capacity to actually carry out the projects themselves. What do you think the long-term impact of this executive order is going to be, and that specific part and the order as a whole?
I think this is one that was long coming. It addresses the issue of local content and investment attraction in the oil and gas sector. It requires the NCDMB, right, to consider in-country capacity when approving Nigerian content plans and to focus on attracting investments, facilitating local capacity, and boosting economic growth. This is in line with the government's vision of increasing the participation of indigenous operators, as it has been since the inauguration of the Local Content Act, as we call it.
Yes.
And ensure that indigenous operators participate, and service providers in the oil and gas industry provide opportunities for employment and investment. It frowns as using empty or shell companies to deliver local projects if they do not have capacity. Because what we've seen in the sector is that previously people just set up companies just because they're Nigerian. They insist on getting those contracts. So this will be an important and complicated point for the NCDMB to address and ensure that where there are no Nigerian companies, they do not unduly withhold approval for those foreign investors, and they ensure that those projects are delivered on a timely basis.
Thank you again, Kenneth. Those were very important insights. Now, moving on to the third order, we see more specificity when it comes to time frames and figures in this particular order. For example, there's been the increase of the approval threshold for production sharing contracts and joint operating agreements. The threshold has been increased to $10 million. Now, the question here is, what happens to such contracts and agreements that are already awaiting approval but fall below this new threshold?
This is an interesting question. I think number one, there's no transition timeline for the operation of this executive order.
Yes.
And therefore it's supposed to kick in immediately. So those applications or approvals that are pending will already be subject to this new rule. So if they fall below the $10 million mark, then they do not require those approvals because they fall below the threshold. Now, this order is very important because it requires the Ministry of Finance Incorporated and Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated to raise this approval threshold, to above $10 million and above. It also increases the duration of third-party contracts awarded to PSC or JOA from 3 to 5 years, with an option for additional renewal for 2 years. It also sets a 15-day timeline for the issuance of approvals or consents for matters requiring approval under the Nigeria Oil and Gas Industry Content Development Act, with a 7-day period for providing additional information for contract review. Now, if you provide that information, the relevant authority also has 7 days to respond. Now, if the regulators do not respond within the 15 days timeline or the 7 days timeline, the operator can take it that the approval has been given, similar to the previous executive order that spoke about default consent. These directives are intended to improve the ease of doing business in the oil and gas sector, reduce bureaucracies and delays, and enhance the efficiency and transparency of the contracting process.
All right, thank you, Kenneth. It will be interesting to see what happens in the implementation stage of this particular executive order. Lastly, there has been some controversy around the legal basis of executive orders and circulars, which amend tax or other laws. What is your take on this?
Thanks, Ochuwa. The legal basis of amending tax or other laws through executive orders has always been an issue of contention. The reason for this is that executive orders are subsidiary legislation. It needs its force from a substantive law. Now, if the law says something and there's a deviation in the executive order, then there are precedents that establish that it wouldn't stand. And there's also the perspective that executive orders without involvement of the National Assembly may not hold the strength or force of the law. So this all depends on provisions of the Constitution and other substantive laws, whether they infringe or they do not infringe. The Supreme Court has actually upheld the constitutionality of certain orders in the past, and one of the recent examples is the Treasury single account. However, there may be cases where the orders conflict with existing laws and may be subject to judicial review. But, in my perspective, I do not see these orders as something that would be challenged by operators in the industry or taxpayers, because they're quite positive. But there are questions around, the consistency of the fiscal policy, right? Because, when changes happen on tax laws and laws generally, without that consistency, it doesn't drive confidence from investors. And if the Finance Act 2023 already removed the 10% investment allowance granted to companies. And this brings it back, for operators in the midstream oil and gas industry. It's a good thing on the other hand, but, questions will be asked, around the stability of the laws and the consistency of the fiscal strategy of the country. So those are some of the things that I believe the investors, we need to do more in ensuring that the investors have more confidence.
Yeah. Okay. I think I agree with those points that you've made. Thank you so much for your time, Ken. It's always great having these types of conversations with you. We hope our viewers and listeners will continue these conversations on their end. So do you have any final thoughts to share with us?
Of course, I always have final thoughts. Yeah. Please visit our website for additional information, and feel free to contact us if you need more facts or information on these new topics. Additionally, we have one of the best apps out there on tax legislation, treaties, tax alerts, notices and things. It's called the Tax 24/7 app. It's a fantastic resource for tax legislation, tax cases, and much more. So that's my final word.
Okay. And with that, we have come to the end of our conversation. Once again, I am Ochuwa Alegeh, and this has been the PwC Tax Recap. Bye for now.